Imagine one of your friends or a loved one walking up to you and you don't recognize that person. Sounds like a nightmare, doesn't it? But this is now one of the side effects of a long COVID infection. We are not saying this, but a new study does. Study by the journal Cortex has linked face blindness to long COVID infection. In simple words, face blindness is a neurological disorder that inhibits a person from recognizing faces. Even though you might have seen that face for your whole life, some people might not be able to differentiate between objects and people also. A book has been written by neurologist Oliver Sacks. It's called The Man Who Mistook His Wife for a Hat. It gives a perfect example of this rare symptom. One of his patients with face blindness, while leaving his clinic, grabbed his wife's head, mistaking it for a hat. What then is the science behind it?
The causes due to long COVID could be either because of a chronic inflammation or autoimmune dysfunction, or it could also be because of psychological reasons.
Surprisingly, this problem, some of the papers they say that 1 in 50 suffer from this. This can develop as a developmental disorder, like in children where they may be having ADHD. And it may be acquired in adults where they can develop after a trauma or a stroke, or sometimes in neurodegenerative diseases like ALZHEIME'S disease.
There is a region in the brain called the occipital lobe. The lobe is a visual processing hub. When eyes generate signals, they are carried by nerve tracts to the occipital lobe. Then this information is passed on to the fusiform area of the temporal lobe. The fusiform area processes this information and then tells you whom this face belongs to. In people with face blindness, the eyes, nerve tracts and occipital lobe are perfectly functional. But they have a defective fusiform area. The defective fusiform area has its own reasons like tumors, strokes, and it can be congenital. What is the connection between long COVID and face blindness then? It all really started with a patient named Danny, who is a 28-year-old customer service representative and part-time portrait artist in the US. She was diagnosed with COVID-19 in March 2020, but her symptoms relapsed 2 months later. She was soon not able to recognize even the faces of her family members. Not just that, she had to rely on Google Maps to find her parked car. Researchers could not pinpoint the exact problem, but few possible explanations were given. One of them, that COVID can manifest itself in some form of neurological disorders, which in turn affects some other regions of the brain responsible for face recognition. Another possible explanation was inflammation and damage to blood vessels, which can reduce blood flow to the brain. Is there a treatment?
Some of them, they can still recognize the people by some clues, like their dressing, by their clothes, or sometimes their voice recognition also.
So the treatment of facial or face blindness or prosopagnosia is treatment of the primary illness. If a patient has a tumor, then the tumor has to be managed. If it is a stroke, it has to be managed. And if it is like for COVID, then I think gradually this will settle with a lot of psychological support.
As of now, there is no treatment, but there are certain things that a patient can do to recognize people.